Welcome to the TOEFL reading section. If you're here, that means you probably tried your best to do the reading section and it's not as easy as you thought. There's so much advice that people give us on the TOEFL reading section. For example, some teachers tell us that we have to read the whole passage at the beginning of the exam. Others tell us that we have to read maybe the first sentence of each paragraph and then answer the questions. Other teachers say that you can go straight to the question, read the paragraph, and answer the question. So many choices, which one do we do? In this section of the TOEFL exam, we're going to break down 10 different tips that can definitely help you out and that have helped hundreds of students already pass their exam and get the highest score possible. But we're also going to have a practice exam so that you know how to use those tips when you practice yourself. You ready? Let's get started. If you're new here, I'm Reggie Scales and I've already helped hundreds of students pass their TOEFL exam. And most of them are right here in America now. So if you're ready, let me explain the 10 tips to you first, so when we do the practice test, you will know exactly what we're talking about. And we're going to take the test together so we can put in practice those tips to make sure that you improve. You ready to go? Let's do it. Tip number 1. Understand what the entire passage is about. You can't answer questions if you don't understand what the title is. And that's the thing. They make sure that they put a title that nobody understands. So before answering the questions, make sure you actually know what the title means. From there, maybe you can consider going to paragraph 1, looking for definitions of that title, and when you know them, then you can start answering some questions. If that sounds a little bit confusing, don't worry. Like I said, when we take the test, we're going to do it together. Number 2. Understanding the different types of questions that they can ask. Now, this can be a factual information question. This can be a rhetorical question. This can be a vocabulary question. There are many kinds of questions that they can ask you. But again, don't worry, we're going to break all of that down in just a minute. Tip number 3. How can you save time? In the TOEFL exam, they give you 35 minutes to do 2 passages. So the tips that you will learn today will help you to be able to finish in time, but you won't be stressed out when you're done. Tip number 4, keywords. That just basically means that when you're reading, you know exactly what you're looking for. You're not just reading to understand, you have to read with a goal, with a purpose. And I will show you exactly what you should look for when you're reading. I know many teachers say, look out for the important words. You have to make sure you know what you're reading. Well, today you're going to know exactly what keywords to look for and how to find them. Tip number 5. Vocabulary questions. I mentioned before that we're going to answer different kinds of questions, but vocabulary questions can actually be a lot simpler than you think. Tip number 6, the dreaded question number 10. That's the last question in the reading section, and you have to choose 3 different answers. And for most people, it's really difficult to get all 3. So after today, you will really understand how to answer that. Tip number 7, modifiers. That basically means that they take the correct answer and then they change it just a little bit and make it wrong. Maybe that's happened to you before. Maybe you had 2 answers and you're like, well, both of the answers are right. Which one is it? Likely there's a modifier there. And we will learn the difference between normal modifiers and extreme modifiers. Extreme modifiers are the easiest ones to catch, so that will definitely help you out in your TOEFL score. Tip number 8, eliminate wrong answers. Maybe you think, wow, this is easy, I have the right answer. Please make sure to go and read the other choices because we're all imperfect, so we can make some mistakes. Even if you think you know you have the answer right, please just go and read the other answer choices really quickly just to make sure that you don't make a simple mistake that we all can make. Tip number 9, why does the author say this? Type of questions. We're going to break that down to make sure that you understand how to answer those. Very simple tip, and you will never miss it after today. And tip number 10, inference questions. What does that even mean, an inference question? Do you have to guess the answer to get it right? We're going to break that down so you never miss an inference question again. All right, guys, well, now that you know the 10 different tips that we're going to break down, let's get into the TOEFL reading section. Are you ready? So when you're taking the test, I'm going to be reading it with you. Just make sure you pause the video when you read before you hear my explanation so you can see if you got the answer after I explain to you the tip. Okay, let's get started. Okay, we see a passage right here in front of us and we have 2 choices. We can either read the entire passage or we can use some tips in order to understand it a little bit. Well, if you remember my first tip, we have to understand what the passage is about. That means we have to understand the title. We can't answer any questions if we don't even know what the title is. So let's take a look at the title first. If you see, it mentions the commercialization of lumber. Maybe we understand what commercialization is, right? Maybe you've seen some commercials on TV, or maybe you've seen some different advertisements. So maybe you know that commercialization means something to do with selling something or something to do with money. But what is lumber? Maybe we don't understand what lumber is. So if we don't understand what selling lumber means, how can we answer the questions? We can't. So always, when you take the TOEFL exam, read paragraph 1 because that will give you many different definitions of the title. Take notes of what those definitions are, and you're going to use those definitions for the entire test. Let's find out if that tip works today. So maybe pause the video, read the paragraph, and take notes of anything that you see about the commercialization of lumber. Okay, so when you read the paragraph, what did you get in your notes about the commercialization of lumber? Well, this is what I got. It's good for selling because it's durable and strong. It's also soft, so it can be easily worked with hand tools. And it floats, so it can be easily transported. You're going to notice that these notes that we took are going to help us in the entire exam, especially in question 10 when we get there. Okay, we already read paragraph 1, so let's check out question 1. It says, the word durable in the passage is closest in meaning to what? If we already read the paragraph and you know the word, maybe you can already guess what durable means. We see that question 1 is a vocabulary question. We already took our notes from paragraph 1, so we already understand the paragraph. But what do we do for vocabulary questions? Well, if you already know the word, I don't recommend going to the paragraph to try to find it because you're only going to waste time. And if you already know the word, just choose it and keep going. The word is not going to change. Now, if you don't know what durable means, you will have to go to the paragraph and try out all of the choices to see which one fits. But first, before you even go read the paragraph, take your time and then see what you think durable means to see if you get it right without reading. Did you guess long lasting? If that's what you guessed, then guess what? You got it right. You didn't need to read the paragraph again. Okay guys, so that's the tip for a vocabulary question. If you already know it, just choose the answer and keep going to save yourself time. And if you don't know the word, then you will have to go back to the paragraph and plug in the words until you guess the right answer. Okay, let's go to question 2. Let's read question 2. According to paragraph 1, all of the following characteristics of pine made it a desirable material for building in the 19th century America, except. Okay, so this is an elimination question. Hey, didn't we already take notes about paragraph 1? Well, let's just look at our notes and choose the right answer. Take your time and see what you get. The choices are, it was long lasting, it was relatively easy to transport, its softness made it easy to work with, it produced buildings that were especially attractive. From your notes, take your time and see what you get from this. Did you guess choice D? If so, you got it right. They never mentioned that in the paragraph. Actually, they did mention something very similar, but choice D is what we would call a modifier. In the paragraph, it mentioned pine was especially attractive for building purposes, but choice D didn't mention that. Choice D said that it produced buildings that were especially attractive. That word building is a modifier. That's not what they said in the paragraph. But maybe you didn't even need the modifier to answer that question. Why? Because you already knew what the commercialization of lumber was from the beginning because you took notes. Okay guys, you're doing great. Let's go to question 3. So let's read the question. What can be inferred from paragraph 2 about timber in America before the year 1860? All right, so we have the question in our minds. And what do we have to do? We have to read the entire paragraph because that will help us with 2 things. First, it will help us to find any key words, meaning any words that are related to our title, the commercialization of lumber. And number 2, it's going to help us to answer this question, and possibly any keywords that we get from here will help us to answer question 10 later without having to go back. Okay, so did your notes look something like this? From the 1860s to the 1890s, farmers stopped selling wood for income. By the 1870s, farmers and city people purchased wood from companies. Okay, so we saw the key words in the paragraph, so let's answer the question, and you should see that it's very similar to what we already wrote. Let's take a look. So What can be inferred from paragraph 2 about timber in America before the year 1860? Farmers of the American West earned most of their income by selling timber to newly arrived settlers? Maybe. Timber came primarily from farmers who wished to supplement their income. Before the year 1860? What do we have in our notes? From 1860 to 1890s, farmers stopped selling wood for income. So let's read this question again. Before the year 1860, timbers came primarily from farmers who wished to supplement their income. That's probably the answer. But let's still look at the other ones. Timber was much more expensive before the year 1860 because it was less readily available. We didn't read that. Timber came primarily from large manufacturing companies in the East. We didn't read that. Actually, that's the opposite of the answer. Timber came after the 1860s. Okay, so we're down to two answers. Question A and question B. One of them has to have a modifier because we can't have two answers that are correct. So let's look at A more closely. Farmers of the American Midwest earn most of their income, do we really know that? Probably not, by selling timber to newly arrived settlers. That's for sure a modifier. We never read anything about newly arrived settlers. So the question is B. Hope you got that one right. Okay, so let's go to question number 4. Let's take a look. Why does the author discuss the British invented bandsaw? Okay, so we see that this is one of those questions where it says, why does the author say this? And we have a quote. Just a little tip for that. Anytime you see a quote and it says, why does the author say this? The only thing you have to do is look at either the first sentence before or two sentences before. The answer will always be there, and this will save you so much time. But still, let's make sure that we read the whole paragraph because this is a new paragraph and this probably can help us out with question number 10. Okay, so let's read the paragraph first, then look at the tip and then answer the question and we'll keep going. So what did you get in your notes for this paragraph? Well, if you're like me, you got that the commercialization of lumber was influenced by technology change. For example, the invention of the bandsaw, also steam-powered mills that allowed them to cut wood. They could transport wood easily. They could heat log ponds. And also there was year-round production. So all of those are the key words from that paragraph. All right, so now let's look at the tip and answer the question. So let's look at the questions with the tip that I showed you before. Remember, if you have a quote, the answer will be whatever was spoken before the quote, right? So let's look at the questions and see which one of them was before the quote. Let's look. A says, to give an example of how steam-powered led to technological advances. Well, steam power came after the quote, so we can eliminate that one. Question choice B, to help explain how the thickness of a saw blade determines how much wood is wasted. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the commercialization of lumber. C, to explain how competition with other countries benefited the American lumber industry. We didn't read that at all. And D, to illustrate the impact of new technology on the lumber industry. Didn't we write that in our notes? That's the answer. Question choice D. Let's go to the next question. Okay, now we have question 5, and we don't have to read it again because we already read the paragraph, we already took notes. So let's read the question. All of the following are mentioned in paragraph 3 as resulting from the use of steam in lumber industry except. Didn't we already write that in our notes? This one should be pretty easy to eliminate. Let's find out. Work became centralized and many tasks were automated. We have that in our notes, so that's not the right answer. We're looking for the wrong answer. Lumber could be produced more efficiently and on a larger scale. We have that in our notes. Waste material could be reused as fuel to power the lumber mills. We don't have that in our notes. Lumber production could continue throughout the cold winter months. We have that in our notes. So which answer would you choose for this one? Just give it some time. Take your time to be able to choose it. If you have the answer is C. Waste materials could be reused as fuel to power the lumber mills. That's the only one we don't have in our notes. So do you see, taking notes before you even look for the question, looking at those keywords just helps you to answer so many questions correctly. Okay, so let's take a look at question 6. It says, the word facilitate in the passage is closest in meaning to what? Again, take your time. If you need to pause the video, do it. If you already know what the word facilitate means, just go ahead and choose the answer and keep going. We already read the paragraph. You don't have to read anymore. If you don't know what facilitate means, then definitely go back in the paragraph and then try to plug in the answers to get the right answer. Do you have it? Okay, well, let's look at the answers. Facilitate, expand, ease, transform, permit. Facilitate means to ease. If you already knew that word, great job. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so now we're on question 7 and we have a new paragraph. First, let's read the question and then see if there's any notes that we can take from the paragraph to find keywords. Let's take a look. According to paragraph 4, how could a warm, dry winter interfere with lumber production? Let's take a look at the paragraph to see if we can find that answer, but also look for keywords. Let's take a look. Okay, so what did you get in your notes for this one? This is what I got. People sprinkled water on roads for easier transportation, and because they sprinkled the water, it was easier to move larger and heavier loads. Did you get something similar to that? Great. So let's take a look at the question and see what the answer is. Okay, the question again is, according to paragraph 4, how could a warm, dry winter interfere with lumber production? Let's see. A, certain trees would become dry and yield low quality lumber. We didn't read that. There would not be enough water in streams and lakes to raft the logs to mills. We didn't have that in our notes. It would be more difficult to transport logs to streams and lakes. We do have something like that in our notes. Let's see the last one. Rivers wouldn't be full enough in the spring to power mills. We don't have that in our notes. So the only thing that we have something similar to is C. It would be more difficult to transport logs to streams and lakes. That has to be the answer. And we know that's the answer because in the wintertime, they would sprinkle the water so that it would get cold and the ice would help them to be able to transport more. So in a warm and dry winter, it would be almost impossible to transport the wood because they would have no ability to make it easier for them to do that. All right, did that make sense? Okay, sounds good. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so now for question 8, we have a new question and we have a new paragraph. Let's read the question again and we're going to repeat the process that we've been doing the whole time. And let's see what the answer will be. Why does the author include the information that 89 logging railroads crisscrossed Michigan by 1887? Well, let's keep that in mind when we read the paragraph. Let's take a look. Okay, are you done reading? So what do you have in your notes? This is what I have in mind. Railroads, thinking about the selling of wood, right? It seems like they had to make railroads in order to do it. Why? Because increased wood prices, warm, dry winters, so it was difficult for them to transport, so this made them make railroads. Okay, with that in mind, let's take a look at the questions. In paragraph 5, why does the author include the information that 89 logging railroads crisscrossed Michigan by 1887? The first one, to argue that Michigan had replaced other Great Lakes states as the center of the lumbering industry. That's not in our notes. To provide evidence of the growing importance of logging railroads in the lumbering industry. Maybe. We do have our notes about railroads. To support the claim that Michigan winters have become more severe in the 1800s than they had been earlier. Don't remember reading that. And the last one, to challenge the idea that climate discouraged the laying of track. Well, we don't have that one in our notes either. All right, so do you remember the tip about why does the author say this? And we have a quote. So let's look in the paragraph to find it, and we're going to make sure that the answer that we think we have is the correct answer. So let's take a look. So we see the quote there at the end of the paragraph. So let's look just 2 sentences ahead to see what we see there. At first, the remoteness of the pine forest discouraged common carriers from laying track. But increasing lumber prices in the late 1870s, combined with periodic warm, dry winters, compelled loggers to turn to rails. So let's look at answer choice B again. To provide evidence of the growing importance of logging railroads to the lumbering industry, that has to be the answer. We're going to lock it in and go to the next one. Okay, we're now on question 9, and that's basically where they have a quote and we have to see where we're going to put that quote in. But if you remember, whenever you have a quote, where should you look? The sentence before. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to take this quote, plug it into the paragraph, and look at the sentences before to see which sentence is the one that matches the most, and that's going to be the answer. If you see, it took us back to paragraph 4 to figure out where we're going to plug that in. So let's just look at the sentences before the quote to see if they match. What does the quote say? Some sleighs were capable of carrying over 100 tons worth of timber. Likely there are two words here that you don't know what it is. If you do, then that's great. The two words that I think that maybe you don't know are sleighs and timber. Even if you don't know those words, you can still use the tip and you can answer the question. Those words are not that important. But just in case you don't know, a sleigh is just a vehicle that you can put things on, and you attach a horse to it or some dogs and you can pull it in the snow. And timber are just trees without the leaves, without the branches. Those are timber. Okay, now that we got that out the way, let's see why they had to carry something so heavy. Let's look at the sentences before the options. So the sentence before the first one, once the streams and lakes thawed, workers rafted the logs to mills where they were cut into lumber in the summer. No, it doesn't really match with carrying heavy material on a sleigh. So let's look at the next one. To counter the effects of climate on lumber production, loggers experimented with a variety of techniques for transporting trees out of the woods. Similar, but it doesn't really talk about heavy weight. Let's go to the next one. In the 1870s, loggers in the Great Lakes states began sprinkling water on sleigh roads, giving them an artificial ice coating to facilitate travel. Maybe again? And let's look at the last one. The ice reduced the friction and allowed workers to move larger and heavier loads. What's the key word there? Heavier. What does the quote mention? 100 tons worth of timber. So something very heavy. That one has to be the answer. All right, now we got 9 questions down from the TOEFL reading section. Now, don't forget, there's still one paragraph that we haven't read before we go to question 10. So just take your time, read paragraph 10. If you see any key words there about the commercialization of lumber, make sure to write that down before you go to question 10. And you're going to notice that it's a lot easier than you thought it was before. All right, take those notes, maybe pause the video, look at the paragraph, take some notes, and then we'll head to the next question. So did you get any notes for the last paragraph? Well, these were the notes that I got. Booms were created to control the direction of logs, and they allowed easier travel in the river. All right, so we answered all the questions. We took notes for all of the keywords in each paragraph. So now we don't have to go back and read the paragraphs again because we already have our notes right here. This is going to save us so much time on question 10. Let's take a look. So basically we all know what question 10 is. There's a quote there and they tell us to choose 3 words that match that quote. But really, the quote is always talking about the main idea. So if you took notes the whole time, you don't really have to go back and see what matches what because you already have your notes with you. But still, let's take a look at the quote. Increasing demands for timber in 19th century America transformed lumbering in the Great Lakes region. So basically, anything about the advancement of selling wood is very important here. So let's look at the answer choices to see which one is the correct option. A, during the 19th century, lumbering became a large-scale industry controlled by manufacturing companies rather than a local enterprise controlled by farmers. Actually, I remember having that in our notes, so we're going to have that as a possible option. Let's go to the next one. After 1860, farmers continued to be the main suppliers of new timber. We already know that's wrong because before 1860 they were, and after 1860 they weren't, so we can eliminate that choice. C, technological advances, including the use of steam power, led to the increased productivity, efficiency, and commercialization of the lumbering industry. We definitely have that about the advancement of the commercialization of lumber or wood. So that's definitely a choice there. All right, D. The invention of new technology such as bandsaws allowed American lumbering companies to make profit by exporting surplus lumber to Britain and other countries. They did talk about the bandsaw, but we never heard anything about them sending anything to Britain. That's a modifier, definitely wrong. Let's go with E. Seasonal changes and severe winters made the development and laying of track for logging railroads slow and difficult. Severe winters, we never read anything about that. Laying track, difficult, never read anything about that. Actually, they switched up the facts. That's not in anything that we read. So we can eliminate that one also. Let's go to F. New methods for transporting logs to mills helped transform lumbering from a seasonal activity to a year-round activity. We definitely have that in our notes. So let's look at the 3 that we've chosen so far. During the 19th century, lumbering became a large-scale industry controlled by manufacturing companies rather than a local enterprise controlled by farmers. Definitely yes. Technological advances, including the use of steam power, led to increased productivity and efficiency. Yes. And F, new methods for transporting logs to mills helped transform lumbering from a seasonal activity to a year-round activity. Yes, all of those were in our notes. Those are the main idea. That is the commercialization of lumber.
Yeah.
All right, so good job, guys. Good job. How was it taking the test with me? I really appreciate that you guys came out to spend some time with me to take some TOEFL tests together. And I know you did really well. If you still need a little bit of practice, please make sure to put these tips that we learned today into practice. The next video that I'll make, I'll actually just describe the different tips that we made so we can keep them organized and you can take notes about that. And you're going to have the best reading score possible. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. My notes that I took today will be in the description below. Just go ahead and click that link. You can go in and you can get the notes that I took. Maybe you can copy the style so you can know how to take notes quickly and improve your efficiency as well. All right, so until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.